Should you add built-ins to your space? Before you spend $15,000, here's how to tell if built-ins will solve a real problem or if you're just following a trend. Because when built-ins are done right in the right space, they completely transform a room. But when they're done in the wrong space, you just wasted money. So let me show you the difference. So here's what built-ins can do when they make sense. They take awkward spaces and turn them into functional storage. They add architectural character to basic rooms, and they create this custom permanent look that furniture just can't match. Because built-ins are integrated into the architecture of your home. So when you walk into a room with well-designed built-ins, it feels intentional. It feels like the room was designed that way from the beginning. And that's why craftsman's home from 1950 still look amazing, because those built-ins added character that lasts for generations. So built-ins are incredible when they're the right solution for your space, and that's what we need to figure out. The first sign that your space is asking for built-ins is when you already have natural alcoves or recesses in the room. So this could be the space between two windows, or the walls on either side of a fireplace, or a chimney breast that creates these natural pockets. And when you have these spaces, built-ins are the perfect solution because the architecture is already creating boundaries for you. So when you fill them with built-ins, they feel like they were always meant to be there. And this is where built-ins really shine, because furniture would just sit in front of these spaces and waste them. But built-ins use every inch and make the architecture work for you. Now the space needs to be at least 24 inches wide to look intentional, because if it's narrower than that, even built-ins will look cramped. But if you have these natural alcoves, this is where built-ins transform a space, because you're taking something awkward and turning into something beautiful and functional. The second sign is when you have awkward gaps that regular furniture just can't solve. So these are spaces that are under 18 inches wide, like the gap beside a doorway, or that weird space between a window and the corner of the room. And here's why built-ins are the perfect solution, because they can be sized exactly for that space. So instead of having dead space that just collects dust, you now have functional storage that actually works. And this is one of the biggest advantages of built-ins. They solve problems that furniture can't solve, because furniture comes in standard sizes, but your house doesn't have standard dimensions. So when you have these gaps, built-ins turn wasted space into useful space. And that's valuable, especially in Toronto, where every square foot counts. Now, if you can fit regular furniture in the space, you should probably just use furniture because it's cheaper and more flexible. But if furniture doesn't work, built-ins are your answer. The third sign is when you have blank walls flanking a focal point, usually a fireplace. And this is where built-ins can completely elevate a room, because when you add built-ins on either side of a fireplace, you create symmetry. You frame the focal point and you add architectural character all at once. So this comes straight from craftsman architecture. Those homes from the early 1900s almost always had built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace. And the reason those rooms still look incredible today is because the built-ins gave the room a structure and character. And that's what built-ins can do for your space. They take a basic fireplace wall and turn it into the feature of the room. But this only works if the fireplace is actually the focal point. Because if your TV is mounted above the fireplace and that's what everyone looks at, then you need to design the built-ins to work with both the fireplace and the TV. So when you have this setup, fireplace with blank walls on either side, built-ins are usually the right answer, because they solve the architectural problem and create that intentional finished look. The fourth sign is when you have a really basic builder home with no architectural details. So these are rooms with flat walls, no crown molding, no wainscoting, just drywall and baseboards. And these rooms feel bland because there's nothing to look at. And this is where built-ins can make the biggest difference, because when you add built-in shelving with proper trim trim and molding, you're not just adding storage, you're adding the architecture the room was missing. So suddenly you have depth, you have visual interest, you have character, and the room feels custom instead of basic. And the great thing about built-in is that once they're installed, they look original to the house. So even though you added them later, they feel like they were always part of the design. Now, you don't need to fill every wall. Sometimes just one wall of built-ins is enough to give the room that finished feeling. So if you have a basic room that needs character, built-ins are a really effective solution because you're fixing the architecture, not just decorating around it. So those are the signs that built-ins are the right solution. But I also need to be honest about when they're not worth it, because you need both sides to make a good decision. Built-ins don't make sense if you're planning to move in the next few years because you can take them with you. So that investment stays with the house. They don't make sense if you're building more storage than you actually need because empty shelves just look sad. They don't make sense if your needs are going to change, like building toy storage when your kids will outgrow it in 3 years. And they don't make sense if the room is really small and built-ins will make it feel cramped instead of organized. So built-ins are for when you have a specific problem, awkward spaces, lack of character, need for permanent storage, and you're committed to staying in your home long enough to enjoy them. Now let's talk about what this actually costs in Toronto. For a small alcove, you're looking at $8,000 to $12,000. For fireplace flanking, that's $15,000 to $25,000. And for a full wall of built-ins, you're looking at $25,000 to $45,000 or more. And yes, this is a significant investment, but remember that you're getting custom work that's built exactly for your space, using quality materials and designed to last for decades. Because when built-ins are done right, they're not just storage, they're architecture. And good architecture adds value for as long as you own the home. The timeline is 2 to 4 months from design to installation because this is all custom work. So the question isn't, are built-ins expensive? The question is, will they solve a problem that's worth investing in? So here's how to decide. Look at your space and ask yourself these questions. Do I have awkward spaces that furniture can't solve? Does this room need architectural character? Am I planning to stay here long enough to enjoy this? Because if the answer is yes, built-ins are probably worth it. They'll transform your space in a way that furniture just can't. If you need flexibility, or you might move, or the space doesn't really have the problem, then save your money and use furniture instead. If you're making cabinetry decisions for your renovation, watch this video next on the 5 kitchen cabinet choices that won't look dated in 10 years. See you there.